I don't know what's more shocking, the fact we now have 15,000 subscribers, 15,000 thriller-loving book friends, or these 15 thriller books I'm about to show you. If you're new here, welcome or welcome back to Francesca's Books. My name is Francesca, these are my books, and here we talk about all things thriller books. I am your go-to thriller girly. So today, to celebrate this milestone, I have 15 of the most shocking psychological thrillers I've ever read. I really wanted to do something to mark the occasion, and these shocking thriller books are shocking for many reasons. Some of them are shocking for their plot twist, but also shocking because of how dark they are, shocking because of how much the characters like really spoke to me and gripped me, which I feel like I don't really talk about enough, or just the plot was just shocking in general, like really unique. I'm also gonna ear away in this video from like the classic like plot twist type thriller books that I always talk about, like The Silent Patient and The Housemaid. I've talked about them over and over again, so they are good books to go and read, but this one's gonna be a little bit different. I'd say at least half of these books I've never mentioned on my channel. So without further ado, the first book is Strange Sally Diamond by Liz Nugent, and I rarely talk about this book because it's just like not my typical thriller read. Like it doesn't have many of the tropes that I would normally like ear towards. It's very, very character driven, but I have to say it absolutely deserves a place here. It is probably one of the most shocking books I've read. Not even for its plot twist, just like its sheer like raw emotional vulnerability and the attachment I had to the characters in this book, and just some of the things that happen along the way, like, but not in like a classic thriller way, just in like a that was just like a shocking action type way. It's also not confirmed but alluded to that our main character is on the autistic spectrum. She has some very neurodivergent behaviours, so I think that also adds to like the shocking factor of like I can't relate personally to her actions, if that makes sense. So this book follows Sally, and her dad dies at the start of the book, and she just disposes of his body like in the trash, and everyone's like, Sally, you can't do that. Like, she's like, well, that's what he told me to do, just get rid of him. So aside from that shocking opening, this then follows Sally's journey of like kind of rebuilding her life after this really big event. This is told from another point of view as well, which I thought was very interesting, and I very much enjoyed having like a different perspective on things. I will say this is a thriller by definition, but it's definitely more of a character-led, contemporary style thriller as opposed to like the classic psychological thrillers that I tend to talk about. This list of shocking thrillers definitely would not be complete without a Lucinda Berry book, and I actually had quite a hard time choosing this. I didn't want this to become like the Lucinda Berry show because all of her books are shocking, like emotionally, plot twist wise, and just like the actual content topics as well. Like every single book would fall into this category, but the one I'm going to talk to you about is Phantom Limb because this is the most recent one I've read and has just stuck with me. This is so dark, okay? Definitely read the trigger warnings before going into this. I even had to put it down at times. It was a lot. However, shock-wise, absolutely phenomenal. It follows these two twins who are identical, absolutely inseparable, and it just follows their journey after having like really abusive childhood, and it's now follows them like in present day, and one of them has just got a romantic partner for the first time, and it's kind of like how that dynamic has changed. The rest of the book then takes a different narrative approach than I was expecting, but in the most fantastic way. I just don't want to tell you what that is. It does say in the synopsis what that like narrative shift is. I think it would class as a spoiler. It doesn't happen until maybe like the 30% mark. The plot twist was absolutely fantastic as well, and I feel like some of Lucinda Berry's have the shock factor at the ending because of like the emotional impact, not because of the twist. This had both. Also worth mentioning here that the other book by Lucinda Berry, which I very nearly chose instead to talk to you about, was Saving Noah. If you've read this book, you will know exactly why. But it follows this child who is technically a pedophile and his mum's journey. I can't even do this book justice by trying to explain the concept. It's so thought-provoking and emotional and just so impactful. That's what we're going with. But we chose Phantom Limb. Saving Noah, different story. Next is a Claire McIntosh book, which I think the concept itself is even shocking. I'm very quick to talk about I Let You Go by this author, and I'm also quite quick to talk about her detective series because it's one of the only ones that I have really enjoyed. But for the purposes of this, probably her most underrated book is definitely ICU. This follows our female main character who is just trying to live a normal life. She has a husband and kids. She's just going to work on the underground one day, and she just picks up this newspaper, and she is in the classified ads section of this newspaper. And when she takes it home and shows her family, they're like, oh yeah, that's so weird, it does look like you. And she's like, no, it literally is me. Like, why am I in this paper as an ad? As you can imagine, she becomes extremely paranoid with this idea that somebody is targeting her for some reason. So the next day she gets the paper again, and this time it's a very similar ad but with a different person, and she's like, I am in trouble here. So she just starts investigating, but where this went was just so good. I remember getting to the end and being like, how does this author do it? Next up is a book that I don't think I've ever mentioned on my channel, which is quite rare because having read maybe like 300 to 400 books, over half of them I would probably never ever talk about on my channel anyway, because they're just like, just not memorable. However, book that I do normally talk about by this author is The Pact by Sharon Bolton, and that one is wonderful, but I wouldn't say it's particularly shocking. It's just really, really good. This book is shocking, and it is The Split by this author as well, and I really, really enjoyed this. I think the main reason I don't talk about it too much is because it did take me like a good 70 or 80 pages to get into this. Like, it wasn't an immediate from page one type read. It's also half set in Antarctica as well, and I feel like all this like cold weather type thrillers aren't really my bag. I don't know, maybe sometimes in winter like I can lean into it, but most of the time I don't prefer it because they always get trapped in a snowstorm, they're always cut off from the outside world, and it's just like the same tropes over and over. But this one did not do that. So our female main character is a glaciologist who is in Antarctica for work. She sees an incoming bow and she is extremely, extremely scared about this bow. And this is what's happening in the first like 50 to 80 pages, and that's why it took quite a while for me to get into it. After that, it jumps to a completely different narrative and just kind of then is like a dual timeline, dual point of view. This absolutely deserves a place here, guys. The ending of this, you won't guess it. There's no way. There's no way. The next one is a book that I also read quite recently, and it is That's Not My Name by Megan Lally. This is technically a YA thriller, but it is so, so good. I feel like I'm enjoying these YA thrillers a little bit more recently. I just finished Not Quite Dead Yet by Holly Jackson, and while this is technically an adult book, it definitely read like YA, so I'm classing it as YA. These types of books, I think, because they need to do something more than have like a really gritty, detailed crime scene, which you could do in an adult book, you obviously can't do that in a YA book, so they have more of like an emotional impact, and I feel like that's why I'm enjoying them as of late. I never thought I would. So That's Not My Name is shocking because of that exact reason. Like the ending of this book, I was like, surely not. I think as well because I didn't expect to enjoy this, I didn't see where the plot was going despite it being written for an 18-year-old audience. I think it's just so worthy of the title of a shocking book. So it follows a girl who wakes up on the side of the road and she can't remember how she got there. She's really, really injured, and luckily there's a policeman that comes and takes her down to the station and is like, what is going on? Like, she doesn't know anything, the policeman doesn't know anything, and with that her dad comes to collect her from the station. Should be plain sailing from there. And then there's another point of view of this teenage boy who everybody's convinced unalived his girlfriend, and he's like, guys, why won't you believe I did not unalive her? Like, I love her. I will say the bits of this that I did read on audio read a lot more teen. I would err on the side of reading this physically because then you can kind of imagine the character voices in your head. I feel like they read quite young on audio. Next, there's another shocking thriller because of how dark it is, and I had to take breaks from this book. It was that shocking and that dark and that gritty. Like, there was no let up from this. It is, of course, The Good Samaritan by John Marrs, and John Marrs's books are on the darker side. Like, they do really lean into that grittiness, but this one was just next level. It basically follows a woman who works on an unaliving hotline for people who are calling in and want to themselves, and she tempts them into it instead of out of it. Like, come on. Honestly, this female main character is disgusting. Like, she is evil. She's pure evil. And I think there's some of the way she spoke to these people and some of her actions throughout this book, shook. The next book I don't think is technically a thriller. No, it's probably not a thriller, but it has the pacing of a thriller and it has the plot twists of a thriller that when I was thinking about which books to include in a shocking video, I had to include it. It is The Favourites by Lane Fargo, and this follows two ice dancers, and I'm probably losing you, like I can feel it because me explaining this book doesn't do it justice. It follows their lives but over 20 years, so you can see this most incredible character development, so much of the plot, and I feel like because it's set over this time period, it's almost fast-paced by default. It's showing you the highlights of these characters' lives and the drama that's entailed throughout their like Olympic journey. And you thriller girlies will be very pleased to know there is also unaliving, there is scandal, there is everybody falling out with each other. I would say it's a suspenseful contemporary, but with the pacing of a thriller. Next up is going to be no surprise to anybody. Hide and Seek by Andrea Mara makes this list, and the reason this one is shocking is because it is just a basic child's story. Like, that's it, that's the concept, a child goes missing, but the execution is so flawless that this is shocking almost because of how much I enjoyed it. Like, it's very, very rare that I struggle to put a book down because of the volume of books I've read. I enjoy my thriller books, don't get me wrong, but for me to physically not put it down to go do other things, that takes a lot, and this book did exactly that. This follows our female main character who moves into a house where a little girl went missing like 20 or 30 years ago, and you're following both these timelines. So you're following the timeline of the little girl in the 80s playing with her friends, all of those characters, and then you've got the characters also in the present day. And as you can imagine, because of the time period and it being set in the same place, there is some overlap. So some of the characters from the 80s are now 20 or 30 years older in the main narrative, and I think it was just so perfectly like woven together, these stories. I just thoroughly enjoyed it. I will say there was quite a lot of characters in this book, but Andrea Mara introduced them in a way that was not complicated at any point. I think they were introduced quite gradually and it was done quite well. There was one point where there was a couple of similar character names and I was like, ooh, but if you just engage brain for like 30 seconds, like, you'll be fine. Next is my favourite book of 2025 so far, and oh my god, this is shocking. It is The Last Party by A.R. Torre, and recently people have been saying to me, like in real life at events and things, like, oh, what's the best book you've read so far this year? And when I explain the concept of this to them, they look me dead in the eye and have nothing to say to me. It's so funny. So this follows a woman who is so obsessed with a serial unaliver who is in prison serving time that she recreates his crimes with her own child. I know, exactly. So he's in prison because he did this like murderous slumber party for these girls, like 8 or 9, and our female main character is like, oh, my daughter's about to turn that age. Maybe that would get his attention. Absolutely unhinged, evil, disgusting. What a woman. I have read a couple of other A.R. Torre books and enjoyed them, don't get me wrong, but I feel like this is just such a standout from this author for me. The next book I talk about quite a lot, but nobody else does. Like, this has been such an underrated book, not by me, by everyone else. Multiple of my actual friends have now read this book and messaged me being like, you were so right. And I'm like, guys, I know, like I read my thrillers day after day after day, like trust me. Anyway, it's been a huge hit and it is She's Not Sorry by Mary Kubica. I don't even really know how to summarize this book, because when I tell you it's about an ICU nurse who's looking after this girl who fell off a bridge and we don't know whether she was pushed or she jumped, it doesn't sound like it's going to be a knockout, but there's so much more to it, but I can't really delve into it anymore without giving anything away, like even maybe just subliminally. Our main character basically just gets way too wrapped up in this girl's life and kind of almost takes it on herself to work out what happened. Highly, highly, highly recommend. My favourite Mary Kubica book of all time. Next is a book that is so shocking for its ending, okay, and I get a few people coming back to me being like, oh, I've started this and I don't know whether to keep reading it because I'm not like super gripped. It is much more of a slow burn than what I normally recommend, but I wouldn't class it as slow. I think it's just medium paced instead of being like this super fast paced, like has to be gripped from page 1 style. And it is Rock Paper Scissors by Alice Feeney. I rated this 5-star when I read it. It may be like a 4.5 now, but it's still very, very high up there. The plot twist of this is so shocking that I hadn't read anything that like had my jaw on the floor since The Silent Patient. Like, I was like, what? It does have this trope that I was talking about before though, where they are like trapped in a cabin because of the snow and they don't leave. Like, they've won a getaway to be there. It's not like an accident, like, and they're very happy. This couple, they're having a great time, but it is still very much, oh, I have no phone service because we're in the middle of nowhere. What a shame. If you can suspend belief on that part a little bit, fantastic time. Wonderful time. The next book is shocking because of its sheer emotional impact, okay? It takes so much for me to be like moved by a thriller book because they're not really designed that way. They're designed to have like the shock factor in terms of maybe like twists or not knowing who to believe, but Drowning by TJ Newman, it nearly had me tearing up. I think again this is a lot more character based than the types of thrillers I normally read. It wasn't like all the characters had like loads of depth to them and like huge backstories. I think it was just more the raw emotion because of the situation. So it follows a plane which is coming down over the ocean. It crashes and the people in this book then have to decide whether they want to stay on the plane with the risk of it sinking but knowing they have oxygen, or get off the plane, try and swim to their escape, I don't know, but they're in the middle of nowhere, so it's unlikely. And also if they're outside the plane and it explodes, then they're obviously going to be unalived. So it's a massive Sophie's choice on what to do, and I think it's because of that journey it was so, yeah. Adrian McKinsey said, I can't put down edge of your seat thriller, and I would definitely say this is an edge of your seat thriller in terms of the outcome you want for these characters. Number 13 is The September House by Carissa Orlando, and I finished this and gave it a 4.5, and then like a week later I was like, I literally can't stop thinking about that like it's a 5-star. Like, it was so good. The characters in this are so raw and real that there was no way it couldn't make this shocking thriller book list. And I don't even mean it from a plot point of view. There was a couple of plot twists, don't get me wrong, and they were indeed shocking, but I think the characterization in this was what made me feel so much while reading it. So it follows this woman who basically lives in a haunted house and refuses to leave because the ghosts only come out in September. So there is obviously a paranormal element, but I think it's almost grounded in reality. So these ghosts that come out and these like things that go on in September, they all have their own little backstory, and I can't really say much more than that. And also our female main character, whose journey we're following's husband has gone missing, and when the daughter finds out like dad's gone missing, like mum, why aren't you bothered, it almost turns into a missing person story as well. This is the best paranormal thriller I've ever read, and I feel like it's completely changed that area of reading thrillers for me. I always thought you either could read a horror book, which was literally like a horror film playing out as a book, or you could have like a psychological thriller, and those two were two very different things. Although this like supernatural paranormal thriller genre does exist, I feel like this has now defined what that should be for me. And then the final 2 books are from the same author. I love this author, and also his books are truly shocking. The first one is The Only One Left by Riley Sager, and this is shocking for its atmosphere and its concept almost. I absolutely love this. It was basically like The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo in terms of its storytelling of a older person who's had a lot going on in their life, been a bit of an enigma, almost been famous, but instead of in Seven Husbands them being a superstar, in this book she is a serial unaliver and wants to tell her story. I think because everyone in this woman's life you kind of had a bit of insight to as well during the book, it made it such a standout. And the twist, the atmosphere, like, this is my favourite Riley Sager book, and I just couldn't not mention it here. And before I reveal my final pick for the most shocking thriller, don't forget to subscribe to my channel if you love thriller books too. The Only One Left was shocking, but Final Girls destroyed me at the end. This was another one that did lean into horror tropes, but this isn't paranormal in any way. It leaned into more of like a Final Girls narrative, where in horror films there tends to be like one girl that makes it out and she's like the survivor, and a few horror authors have taken this concept and made books about it too. So this one follows Quinn, who survived a massacre years and years ago, but that's as horror-y as it gets. So if you're not into them, like, that is it. Just more the initial concept. It then goes into a thriller about her everyday life. There's a pool of characters around her which she loves and she hates, and I just feel like this one it really upset me by the end. I was like, but like in a great way, like in a fantastic way. I had such a good time. So those are 15 shocking thriller books to add to your TBR in celebration of 15,000 subscribers. I'm still just like over the moon. Like, I am so happy to have you guys here. If you have read any of those books, do let me know, and which were your favorites, and if there's any books that you would add to this list, I would also love to know. So until next time, don't forget to like and subscribe, and I'll see you there.